the original purpose of NATO was to counterbalance and checkmate the USSR. USSR broke up, NATO continued expanding eastwards. And they had given a guarantee to Russia that they would not expand an inch eastwards. And the moment the USSR broke up, they started expanding eastwards. So NATO's original purpose was to counterbalance the USSR. Now it is, whether you like it or not, it's an anti-Russia alliance. And recently, some Japanese politician actually said that, and then it was censored. That nothing happens in Japan without US approval. If any important policy decision is made, there are US generals who are sitting there overseeing that.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, you should know. I mean, that's the hidden reality of the world. If you look below the surface, you find all of this coming out. There was, I think, 1989 or something, when suddenly there's this explosion of terrorism in Kashmir. That is when the Kashmiri Hindus, the Kashmiri Pandits were forced out of Kashmir. So that was all, whether we like it or not, there is no other way to say it. It was all funded and financed by the US.
It's a fact that most modern day news media is biased, is possibly bought out, is possibly not pure, which is why today's podcast should reach international audiences. Abhijit Chavda is on the show again. He's a scientist, he's a historian. But for me, my favorite version of him is when he becomes a geopolitics expert. Of course, he's given us updates about the Russia-Ukraine situation, but we spoke about everything from the India perspective to the France perspective to the China perspective to the America perspective. I don't think we've ever created such an important geopolitics themed episode. So please watch it till the end. Some of it is heavy, some of it is controversial. We've even mentioned everyone's favorite internet topic, the Illuminati. Lots of intense opinions coming your way, courtesy Abhijit Chavda on the Ranveer Show. It's not a Bollywood star today. You guys got what y'all wanted. We got Abhijit Chavda in the house. How are you, sir?
I am great. It's great to be back on TRS. Always good to talk to you.
It's great hosting you in the new space. The thing you should know is that our old space was sustained because of your podcast.
Thank you.
And everything you did for the show. When we couldn't get on the celebrities and all that, we got on folks like yourself and kind of turned this podcast into a knowledge podcast. Speaking about knowledge, sir, this is a geopolitics special.
Yes.
I learn almost all my geopolitics from you through these podcasts, through your YouTube channel. I love everything that you're doing. So
thank you so much.
Going to link it down below, guys. Please go check it out. But first, we got to talk about the Russia-Ukraine situation, the Russia-Ukraine updates, and moreover, the world updates, what it means for India now, going forward. The joy of geopolitics is if you study it enough, you can start predicting the future a bit. So let's touch upon those topics as well. I don't even know where to begin this particular podcast, sir. So maybe let's just do a very quick kind of storytelling recap of what happened in the Russia-Ukraine war since our last podcast, which we did at the start of the conflict. So what's happened? What do you think Putin's state of mind is now? What do you think is the future of that situation?
Right. So we had the last discussion just before the war happened. And on February 24, Russia invaded Ukraine. And everybody expected that they would steamroll Ukraine, wipe it out, flatten it. But nothing of the sort happened. They went in very systematically, very deliberately. Their vehicles were even obeying the traffic signals and all. So they were doing it in a very systematic way. They did not destroy any communication lines, any power lines, nothing like that. And they have been, it looks like they had a very clear plan of exactly what they wanted and what they did not want. So they had marched all the way up to the capital city, Kiev, and actually encircled it. And eventually they retreated from there. So it looks like it was a chess move meant to deceive the opponent as to what the real intentions are. So as of today, it's been, today is the end of May, more or less. What's happened, what the situation on the ground right now is such that they have captured at least 1/4 of Ukraine. It is now under Russian control. It is an area of land larger than Bangladesh, larger than Nepal. Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe, and 1/4 of that has been taken over by Russia. The eastern part of Ukraine and the southern part of Ukraine, more or less the coastal regions. So it looks like now that the objective was to cut off the entire coast of Ukraine, the Black Sea coast, and the eastern part, which is the Donbas region. Donbas. That seems to have been the objective of the Russian advance. Now, what is Mr. Putin thinking? What is Mr. Zelenskyy thinking? Zelenskyy is essentially nothing but a puppet. He is a puppet of NATO, of the West. NATO wanted to expand into Ukraine, and it looks like they were trying to provoke some kind of reaction from Russia, which would enable them to impose sanctions and essentially try to cripple the Russian economy, which has not kind of worked. Because if you see the strength of the Russian ruble on February 23, one day before the war, and if you see it today the Russian ruble is stronger. It is at a better position. So the Russians have been able to not only stop the bleeding, but reverse it and make their currency stronger, because they have the trump card, they have the aces, the oil and gas supplies to Europe. The whole of Europe is essentially dependent on Russian gas. And the Russians have said, you want to buy our gas, you have to pay in rubles, which means there's a demand for the currency, which means its price goes up.
Wow.
So that's what they've done. So that
was definitely an angle for even starting the conflict in the first place. One of the angles?
I think it is something they had foreseen.
Okay.
I think this war, this invasion has been in the planning for at least 5 to 10 years. Because we know what happened in 2014 when the Russians annexed the Crimean Peninsula. So all of that, I think, was a long-term game plan. It is territory that was traditionally Russian territory. If you see the history, it's always been that way. And because of the circumstances that led to the disintegration of the USSR, all of these territories were taken away from Russia. So now they are taking it back. So it looks like they want to take out 1/4 of Ukraine, eastern region, and the entire coastal region up to Odessa in slightly towards the west. So that seems to be the game plan. They are also coordinating with China, because China and the US have this big friction. So the Chinese and the Russians are coordinating. I would not call it a long-term alliance. It's an alliance of convenience, because Russia and China are also actually adversaries. If you look at the geography, it is inevitable that there will be adversaries. As China rises, Russia will feel threatened. And as of today, there are Russian ballistic missiles aimed at China. Yeah, so it's there, and vice versa. So that's how it goes. In geopolitics, there are no real adversaries or allies. It's like dance partners. When you dance with a person, the way you dance it will depend on your physical characteristics and your partner's physical characteristics. If you do the tango, the foxtrot, or the salsa, or whatever, if you're large, your partner is small, you're going to dance in a certain way. If your partner is larger than you and you're smaller or weaker, you're going to dance in a different way. So it's all about the dance. It's not about enmity or alliance, it's about the dance. So right now we are witnessing a certain kind of dance between Russia, China, and NATO. NATO is a stand-in for the US. One thing people don't realize is that the largest power in Europe, apart from Russia, is the US. It's not Germany, it's not France. These are all subsidiary states of the US. The US is what drives NATO and the EU. So none of the countries in Western Europe has an independent foreign policy except for France. And there's a lot of friction between France and the US.
Okay.
So there's all of this dynamics at play right now. And so that's where we are vis-a-vis the Ukraine situation.
What is the friction between France and the US?
Well, the US, see, it's like this. At the end of World War II, the US and the USSR were the victorious powers in Europe. Most of the fighting was done by the USSR, and most of the bleeding was done by the USSR. But the Americans, and as soon as the World War II got over, there was this Cold War that came into place, because the US realized that Russia is very powerful and they wanted to dominate Europe. So then that's where the Iron Curtain came into place, and Europe was split into two branches. One was the Eastern Bloc, which is the USSR bloc, and the rest was the American bloc. Now, the Americans have a permanent military presence in several European countries. Germany has been under permanent US occupation since 1945. People don't realize it. So Germany is not truly a free country. It's a country under foreign occupation. And similarly, and the UK also is a US vassal state, more or less. It's only France that has maintained some kind of strategic autonomy over the years because of the policies they pursued.
Okay, a little hard-hitting question. Is this economic imperialism?
It is geopolitical, geoeconomic, geostrategic imperialism.
Okay.
The US, we consider it to be a superpower. That's the nice term to use. It's actually an empire.
Yeah, 100%.
Superpower is a euphemism for empire. Let's understand what really happened. In the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, the UK was the British Empire, which encompassed much of the globe. Now, in the 1920s, 30s, etc., the UK was waning. The British Empire was declining. It was in gradual decline. And after World War II, what happened is that the empire continued, but the headquarters moved westwards from London, UK to Washington, DC. It's the Anglo-Saxon Empire. It's the same entity. All of the structures are still in place, but now it's dominated from Washington, DC.
And the Illuminati.
Maybe.
That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole different thing, yeah.
Are you familiar with the Freemasons thing?
Yes, of course.
Would you like to enlighten the listeners who are just curious about this whole Illuminati angle and Freemasons?
Right. So the Freemasons are supposed to be, they are known to be a secret society of sorts.
Yeah.
They're not very secret nowadays, but there is some aspect of the Freemasons that is like open to all. Like there are these Freemason lodges or chapters in various countries in the world, including in India.
Okay.
And so the Freemasons started off as maybe a Jewish cult, not a cult, but a society of some kind. It was a very secret society, and it was persecuted in Europe during the Middle Ages, etc. That's why they became very secretive. And it is alleged that they hold the reins of power in Europe and across the world. And they have chapters across the world, including in India. Many prominent Indians were Freemasons. They were members of the Freemason society.
Supposedly like?
Rudyard Kipling. Kipling was one. He was obviously British born, but British. Swami Vivekananda.
Really?
Absolutely. You look at the website of the Freemasons, the Indian chapter, and you will see the pictures of all the prominent Indian Freemasons. One was Swami Vivekananda, one was Motilal Nehru, and J.R.D. Tata most likely.
Right.
So several prominent Indians of the past have been members of the Freemason society.
Maybe the long-term objective is just to survive and
Perhaps to
continuously
survive.
hoard power.
Perhaps to survive, perhaps to rule the world, perhaps to rule the world from behind the scenes without drawing attention to where the real power lies. Perhaps to distract the world into believing the power lies in X place, but it actually lies in Y place. These are conspiracy theories, but it's possible. It's theoretically possible.
No, I believe there was a rival society called the Moors, if I'm not mistaken.
The Moors.
Yeah, it was a whole Masons versus Moors thing.
I see.
And one of the narratives I've read is that it was primarily white people versus primarily black people.
The Moors are supposed to be the African origin invaders of Europe, the Islamic invaders of Europe. Yeah. So they were obviously African people.
Yeah. And what I read is that Africa from ancient times was actually a very rich continent.
Yes.
Governed by Moors. And if you actually speak to Nigerian, Ghanaian people today, they talk about their own history in a very prolific manner. They say that, no, listen, we were a very rich part of Africa. And the same with Ethiopia, etc. Which is at the other far end of Africa. History is written by the winners of war. What is said is that there could have possibly been a massive war between the Masons and the Moors. And all this is just speculation. But this is what I've read. There could have been a massive war between the Masons and Moors. The Masons came out on top. It wasn't white versus black. It was Masons and Moors where there were white and black on both sides. But the Masons came out on top and they rewrote African history in a very negative, broken manner. So the same narratives that we have in Indian culture where we blame the British for spoiling our education system, spoiling our mindset, giving us that victim mentality, not opening up the economy till 1990. Similar narratives exist in Africa today as well, where a lot of Africans have a very low sense of self-esteem. And I know this because of a lot of African YouTubers I met. I met someone called Volodymyr. He's a Ghanaian YouTuber whose main purpose right now as a YouTuber is to kind of help the narrative of Africa all over the world.
I see.
So this bad narrative of Africa has also led to increasing worldwide racism against black people in general. But anyway, that's what so-called powerful societies like the Freemasons can do over 100 or 200 year time period.
Quite possible. They can, if you have a secret society that is very powerful, you can orchestrate world events from behind the scenes and then blame somebody else for it. It's quite possible.
And psychologically affect an entire generation.
Yes, it can destroy entire societies and deracinate them, brainwash them, make them see themselves as very inferior. That sort of thing has been seen over and over again.
Yeah. I also feel power is strongly dictated by where the money is at. So I am sure that if you just scan big money shifts over the last 200 years, you'll be able to kind of spot where the Freemasons were at. Like how the Kohinoor diamond landed up in the UK or all of India's ancient wealth landed up in the UK. Bharat was split up into 4 countries, etc., etc. So what you're saying about the modern day Freemasons definitely could be in Europe, could be in America. But if you had to guess where and who the modern day Freemasons are, what would be your guess?
I would imagine it could be possibly somewhere in Europe or America, maybe split across both the continents. It's actually just one entity. And if you're really rich and really powerful, borders don't mean anything. You can go and reside anywhere in the world. So if the Freemasons do exist, they will be residing in open sight, but they will not draw attention to themselves. And they'll be so rich that nothing matters. And they will try and pretend like they're powerless or whatever. I mean, if you are that rich, you want to hide in plain sight and not display any outward signs of wealth or power. So it could be in continental Europe, Western Europe, or in the US, North America, most probably.
I'd actually love the listeners of this podcast at this point to drop your comments in terms of everything you have read about the Illuminati, Freemasons, so that we can take this part of the discussion further the next time. But right now, let's get back to the war situation and the current geopolitical scenario. Actually, no, let's go back to Freemasons. Do you think NATO is also aligned with the Freemasons? I would actually reframe that question as, at the forefront, everyone knows what the purpose of NATO is, to sort of help maintain world peace and whatever the narratives are online. My question to you, sir, behind the scenes, what do you think the objectives of NATO are?
The objective of NATO is very simple: to maintain and prolong American hegemony in Western Europe and hopefully all across the world.
What is the meaning of hegemony?
Hegemony means overwhelming superiority of all kinds, economic, military, etc. Power. So that's what it is. That's why we call the US a superpower, because essentially it has the ability to intervene anywhere in the world at 30 minutes notice, either militarily or economically. Its currency is the global reserve currency, the US dollar, which means it can cut any country off at a moment's notice from the global financial system and so on. So it has overwhelming economic power and overwhelming military power. It has 10 aircraft carriers. It has a fleet of nuclear submarines. It has ballistic missiles. It has an array of spy satellites, military satellites. It can intervene anywhere it wants within 30 to 60 minutes on demand. So that's what it is, and that's one of the components is NATO in Europe.
Like how they say wars are primarily won because of logistics. So NATO has basically set up an intense logistics system for America all over the world so that they can intervene in any war.
So NATO is all about Europe.
Okay.
The original purpose of NATO was to counterbalance and checkmate the USSR. It was essentially an anti-USSR alliance. But after the USSR broke up, NATO continued expanding eastwards. And they had given a guarantee to Russia that they would not expand an inch eastwards. And the moment the USSR broke up, they started expanding eastwards. So that essentially is what led eventually to the Ukraine conflict that we are witnessing right now. So NATO's original purpose was to counterbalance the USSR. Now it is, well, whether you like it or not, it's an anti-Russia alliance.
I mean, for the time being.
For the time being.
Because that's what's required right now.
Yes. They would like to destroy Russia if possible.
This is why it's so important for people to stop watching traditional news media. Because it can be controlled by powers larger than yourself. And if you want your news, get it from 3-4 different angles in terms of watch right-wing news, watch left-wing news, watch centrist news, listen to podcasts, hear perspectives of YouTubers, and then form your own opinion at the end of the day.
Yes.
For example, we were talking about Succession outside. And even in Succession, I think in season 2, there is a dialogue where someone says that, no, I get my news from a comedian's podcast. And they were hinting at Joe Rogan.
Okay.
Very obviously. He's the only comedian with a mainstream podcast. And the other character reacts like, in a bad way that, oh, okay, then I don't take you seriously. So maybe the Freemasons are working through mainstream media and fictional shows like Succession to drive the narrative against the people who are speaking the truth.
It is possible. Media is extraordinarily powerful. It is what helps whoever is in power control the thoughts, feelings, and ideas and emotions of people, and the perceptions and the worldview of people. So if you control the media, you can make people believe whatever you want them to believe.
Which is why Zelensky's image was whitewashed this much, according to you?
Well, Zelenskyy is an interesting individual. He is of Jewish origin. He is the president of a country where Nazis have free run, neo-Nazis. I mean, the Ukraine has a Nazi history.
Give some backstory also.
Well, if you look at the various atrocities that took place against Jews in that part of the world during World War II, there was a lot of it coming from the grassroots in Ukraine. The people and the political leaders. There was this guy called Stefan Bandera, who was a very virulent Nazi. Today, he's one of the national heroes in Ukraine. And even today, you have this Azov regiment, the Azov regiment, which is essentially a neo-Nazi regiment. They have these Nazi tattoos and all that. And they are fighting, they are involved in the conflict. The Russians want to destroy them. And this guy Zelinskyy, he's a Jew and he is supporting Nazis who massacred his own people. In his address to the Greek parliament, Zelinskyy brought with him a new Nazi, a member of the Azov brigade, I believe. So that's the situation there in Ukraine. It's so strange that a Jewish person would actually promote Nazi people, but that's how it is.
Yeah, you know what I found strange about this whole Zelenskyy narrative online is that it was too whitewashed. Like that they were just talking about the good shit about him, and every leader, including Barack Obama, including like the most iconic leaders in history, have a dark side. It is the nature of leadership. It is the nature of politics. No one can be completely whitewashed. And you are seeing YouTube videos, Instagram memes, Reddit articles about how awesome Zelenskyy is, but there has to be some sort of a dark side, at least a bit, at least something wrong that he's done. He can't be a perfect leader. Which got me thinking that, okay, let's question the situation. And in no way is me defending Putin. Like everyone knows Putin's dark sides very openly. I've met Russian people, spoken to them. Even they have like grey opinions about him. But at least it's more real than whitewashing someone entirely.
Putin is real. We know his dark side. We know he's a dictator. We know he's authoritarian. We know everything about him. It's been discussed ad nauseum in the media. Zelenskyy, they have created this brand. There's this brand building exercise going on right now.
Right.
Zelenskyy.
That he stood in the middle of Kiev. He escaped Russian. There's so many stories.
Yes.
I like the story about the Russian fighter jet. They call it Russian. The
ghost of
Ukrainian fighter jet.
Yeah. It turned out to be fake news.
That's what. There's so much branding. There's so much storytelling happening from the Ukrainian side. What about the Russian side?
It's been blanked out. It's been blanked out totally.
Except in Russia, where it's whitewashed for them.
Well, they have to put something out. But what's happened is that on social media, which is all controlled in the US, all these Russian channels and Russian handles have been banned. So there's only one narrative being spread right now. So that's what we are watching. It's the disinformation or brand building in real time.
Can I give a deeper brand building angle here? Because I come from the world of brands, human beings, and I'm not talking about the so-called intellectual human beings or the upper classes, the general masses can never relate to concepts or non-living objects, but they can always relate to people. Zelenskyy is now synonymous with Ukraine. When you think of Zelenskyy, you'll think of Ukraine.
Yes.
If Zelenskyy is a hero as a brand, Ukraine becomes the hero brand and Russia becomes the obvious villain. The world can't understand grey. They can only understand villains and heroes.
Yes.
So you're painting Ukraine as a hero, an underdog hero, and the coach in the Ukraine corner is Big Daddy USA.
Yes.
So you're trying to project USA as the big protector, etc. That's the actual brand building that's going on here in terms of maybe the actual war is obviously happening between USA and Russia and everyone knows that. But it's this whole branding of Zelenskyy is happening from a perspective of, again, rebranding USA as the forefront of the world, because I think the whole Trump situation affected the branding of USA all over the world, amongst other things. In terms of there is this kind of worldwide sort of little bit of hate that's begun against USA for being overly material, for affecting the environment in the way it does. Could this be an angle?
Certainly. Right now, what we are witnessing is that the world is now beginning to see through all the lies and disinformation. The US has been orchestrating coups all across the world. All of that has come out in black and white now. The entire list is available on social media anytime you like, anytime you want to see. There is this conflict going on in Yemen that they are engineering, and so much else going on. They talk about a rules-based world order. They flout the rules anytime they feel like. So now people are beginning to see the hypocrisy and the lies. And what the Americans are trying to do is they are trying to position themselves as the good guys, as always, and the Russians as the bad guys. And Zelenskyy is this Che Guevara-like figure, right? They are trying to position him in that sort of manner. So that's what they're doing. And it's very easy to sway people's opinions. When you have an underdog who is under siege and who is standing bravely, people want to root for the underdog.
Yeah,
it's always that way.
Psychological.
Yeah, psychologically.
David and Goliath.
That sort of thing, yes.
Wow. Little quick anecdote on Che Guevara. I mean, for people who have never heard of it.
So Che Guevara was this Marxist guerrilla who fought in Cuba, who fought in South America. He fought on the side of Fidel Castro, who became the authoritarian leader of Cuba, who ruled for many decades when Cuba was under US sanctions. It still is, actually. And we see him, the world sees him as a great rebel and a great freedom fighter, but he had a very dark side. He took part in massacres and summary executions of people and all that. He was a very cruel person. Eventually, he went down south to Latin America, and he tried to foment other Marxist revolutions over there. Eventually, he was hunted down and executed by certain forces that were allied with the US. But we see him as the guy in the poster. The guy with the wild hair, the motorcycle diaries, and that very famous poster that we have everywhere of Che Guevara. It's on t-shirts, it's on walls everywhere. So people remember iconic images, and that's what they've created out of him. So that is a little bit about Che Guevara.
Illuminati, man. This is the Freemasons at work again. But coming back to the actual conflict, we were talking about America. I want to just give two disclaimers here. One, I honestly love that country for its ambition and the kind of morals that it stands for. I've learned a lot for my own professional life directly from the USA. Directly inspired from those entrepreneurs, directly inspired from how that country runs, directly inspired from how it's a country built by immigrants. There's too much to learn from that country, but no one's completely whitewashed. That's why we have to highlight some of the gray, some of the darker stuff, which is why I have to ask you about the actual atrocities which are not reported by mainstream media, including Indian news channels. What is not reported about what America is doing all over the world? And I'll tell you why. India does not have a culture of free speech.
Yes, we
That's
don't
true.
have it. Yeah.
We're not allowed to say
certain things.
Yes.
Yes.
Therefore, that means in public forums, you can't really express yourself completely.
Yes.
Contrary to America, where there is a culture of expressing yourself.
There used to be one.
Oh, okay.
There used to be one.
I believe that the history they're taught in high schools is part history and part modern day civics, in terms of they teach them about what's happening with the political situation now. The good thing about USA is that from age 16, they're at least taught to think about current affairs, as far as I understand. Or maybe the morphed version of current affairs that their news serves them. But technically we're neutral, sir, because India is not on either side.
We're not.
And I know that Americans watch episodes with you. We've had, I think, American Marine, I believe she reviews our episode. You should check those out. Hi, if you're watching. What's the neutral perspective on what America is doing all over the world in terms of the geopolitics that you have learned? And I know that you don't even get your geopolitics from, say, a BBC, a CNN. You get it from like a wider perspective. Yes. So what's the neutral opinion on what America has been doing behind the scenes? In terms of, America is responsible for a lot of atrocities all over the world. Let's highlight that.
Well, if you want to talk about atrocities, we can think about Dresden in World War II. There is this German city called Dresden. It was firebombed by the Americans. I don't know how many thousands of tons of bombs were dropped in one night. The entire city was burned down. Tens of thousands of people were burned alive. There was no need for that. They talk about not harming civilians. What about this? And when it comes to Japan, what was the need to drop 2 atomic bombs on a destroyed country? I think they were trying to test the effect of nuclear radiation and fallout on human beings. There was absolutely no need to do that. Then let's talk about Vietnam. The amount of mines they've dropped, the amount of bombs they dropped over there on Vietnam, the biological and chemical weapons they dropped there, Agent Orange to defoliate the forest. It causes birth defects even today in Vietnam. And the various massacres they carried out, My Lai massacre, I mean, they shot about 300-400 people to death in a village, unarmed men, women, children, that sort of thing. That is just the tip of the iceberg. So they have done all these things. The highway of death in Iraq, the Iraqi soldiers were retreating. They were not doing anything. They were not fighting, and they were all mowed down from the air. I mean, there is this whole list, this whole litany of atrocities they've done. But one could argue that they are simply trying to preserve their hegemony, their superpower status, their empire status, which is something every empire does. If you look at the Roman Empire, it was not bathed in milk. It was. The history of the Roman Empire is full of these atrocities. Julius Caesar committed genocide in Europe, the Celtic people. Alexander was a brutal, cruel tyrant. I mean, look at the things he did. His own historians wrote about that. The number of people he crucified, the number of people he killed for no reason. In India, it is alleged, his own historians, the Greek historians, write that he did all sorts of atrocities. So the Americans are not the only empire that have done it. But yes, they have been doing this. They have been engineering coups. They don't really believe in democracy. They have been engineering undemocratic coups everywhere. And they occupy many countries even today. Japan, for instance, is under US military occupation since 1945. It's permanent military occupation. Japan is a country under foreign military occupation. It's not a democratic country. The Constitution of Japan was written by the Americans. It has not been amended once since 1945. The South Koreans, their country is under US occupation since the 1950s, permanent US occupation, dozens of US military bases over there. The logic, the rationale is that we are offering you protection against the evil North Koreans. And the rationale for Japan is that we are offering you protection against China. But there are dozens and dozens of US military bases, which I'm sure the Japanese don't want. They have been protesting against that in Okinawa and other places. Shinzo Abe, for instance, he was one Japanese prime minister who wanted an independent foreign policy. He was talking about revising the constitution. Suddenly he resigns. He says, my health is not good, and so on and so forth. So that's what they've been doing.
I also want to highlight one thing. Now, this is where you actually get to know the power of America.
Yes.
It's a powerful entity,
yes.
USA. And wherever power resides, money gets attracted to those places. South Korea, extremely rich. Japan, extremely rich. Germany, extremely rich. I don't know if I'd say the same word, Italy. But at least these three grown so much economically. Could this be a reason?
Well, Japan is an interesting case. In the 1980s, Japan was one of the powerful economies. It was the number 2 economy in the world in the 1980s. It was projected to eventually surpass the United States. The Japanese business policies and models were copied and studied all across the world. They were a real business and economic superpower. They were a vibrant economy and a very confident nation.
Yeah, it's a very interesting case. Right? They combined samurai mentalities with business to make more efficient systems and to make teams work better. It's called, I think, Japanese economic boom. Post-World War, Japanese economic boom. Very interesting case.
Very interesting. And then suddenly something happened. All of a sudden, it's like somebody switched off a faucet, a tap, and the economy went into a recession overnight, which it has still not recovered from. Today, Japan is a decaying country. It's a beautiful country with a beautiful culture, one of the most technologically advanced society in the world, and still very traditional. But it's an aging population. The fertility rate has dropped below replacement levels. There is this phenomenon of hikikimori or something it's called, where youngsters, they stay forever in their parents' basement. They don't go out. They don't interact with the world. And there's a lot of suicides over there. Elderly people dying alone. This society is crumbling and decaying. What happened overnight? They were surging ahead, and all of a sudden something went wrong. I wonder what went wrong. Something behind the scenes happened, and the whole economy was ruined. That's what happened. Who's really running Japan? It's the US. It's the US that is really ruling Japan or running Japan. Recently, some Japanese politician actually said that, and then it was censored. That nothing happens in Japan without US approval. If any important policy decision is made, there are US generals who are sitting there overseeing that. And that's how it is. And similarly for South Korea. South Korea, again, it is a prosperous country, one of the highest GDP per capita numbers in the world. And you can see, though, that their society is being re-engineered. I have nothing against any specific religion, but you have a certain Western religion that is taking over the country. So there are a lot of people who are atheists and a lot of people who are increasingly becoming Christians. And that is something the Americans have been engineering since the 1950s. They sent, hundreds, maybe thousands of missionaries to South Korea. Similarly with Japan.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, you should know. That's the hidden reality of the world. If you look below the surface, you find all of this coming out.
What's happening in Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia is peaceful. Okay, it's very well controlled, very rigidly controlled and all. Nowadays, there is liberalization happening because the Americans want that. So nowadays, women don't have to wear whatever they used to wear earlier. They can drive, they can leave their hair open and all. So there is some change happening in Saudi Arabia, most likely at the behest of the US. But Yemen has been disastrously plundered right now. It's being bombed every day. So there is this famine-like situation, starvation happening there. There are no supplies, no medicines, daily bombardment from Saudi Arabia. So that's what's happening. It's a humanitarian crisis, but nobody cares because nobody reports what's happening there.
I think to understand the Russia-Ukraine situation much better, you have to understand who the enemies of the US are. And people's focus is on Russia and Ukraine, but there is sort of this world war happening already.
It's a Cold War 2.0, you could say, which is happening right now. Right now, it's not really hot, but the pieces are moving into position for possibly a new war. And if a new war happens, a real war involving the US, it would most likely happen in the Indo-Pacific region.
You know, when some motherfucker in a bar tells me this, I don't get scared. When you tell me this, I get a little scared.
No, it is scary. It is scary. Because if a war happens in the Indo-Pacific, it's the Indo-Pacific. India will be involved in that. Whether we like it or not, we will be pulled into that.
In a hot war.
In a hot war.
Both you and me don't follow national politics intentionally. We just spoke about it.
Yeah.
Very quickly, sir, explain why you don't follow national politics and why do you instead follow geopolitics?
See, there's politics at all levels in the world. In your family, there is politics. In your building, apartment complex, there is politics. At the municipal level, at the district level, at the state level, at the national level, you have politics at various scales. I am not interested in petty politics. It just doesn't interest me. I am interested in the competition for the biggest prize in the world, which is geopolitics and geostrategy. That is what interests me. I'm a big picture guy. That's what I've always been. So that's what I look for. That's what excites me and interests me. These local elections and politics and all that really doesn't hold much water for me.
Yeah. Again, for me, the reason is just interest. I've never been interested in national politics. The moment I had my first geopolitical conversation, coincidentally with you, I was like, okay, this is my new subject. But so the anecdote I do want to share here is I was talking to a host of really intelligent people and people from all faiths. Okay, Hindus, Muslims, Catholics. The one input I've got about the current Indian government is, I'm not talking about a national level. I'm not talking about what's happening inside the country. And that's again a little bit of a gray area. Everyone's got their own very strong opinions on it. But internationally, suddenly since Modi's at the forefront, we are perceived as a, hey, don't mess with me kind of figure. Everything from Modi's branding abroad to even the way he treats other politicians. There is that sense of power. Now, people criticize him for being seen so much abroad, for traveling so much. There was a YouTuber, I think it was Think School, who did a fantastic video on the string of pearls theory. And he said that, why do you think Modi's traveling so much to all these countries? He's traveling to strategic countries to strengthen us geopolitically. We have gentlemen like Ajit Doval kind of sitting right next to Modi and advising him geopolitically. Ajit Doval, if you actually read his history and about his life, he's one of the world's best strategists ever. I would actually link the video that Dr. Vivek Bindra did on Ajit Doval. It's fantastic. You'll get to understand what Ajit Doval's mind is like. I am dead sure Ajit Doval has a role to play in India's geopolitical game right now. I'm 110% sure. He's always had a role. He's just a very senior strategist now who's probably heading that mission. So the Indian military is obviously getting prepared. But before we talk about the Indian military, sir, I want to ask you about Modi from a geopolitical perspective. While we don't follow national politics, I'm sure you're aware, as am I, but purely from an international geopolitical standpoint, what's your opinion on how the world looks at Modi and India right now?
So ever since Mr. Modi came to power, the perception of India very rapidly changed. That for the first time in living memory, we have a no-nonsense leader who upholds the national interest. Went all around the world. He met various world leaders. He met Trump. He met Barack Obama before that. He re-established good relations with Israel. He established a very warm rapport with Shinzo Abe of Japan. And he went and wooed all of India's potential allies. And he established very good relations with the Gulf countries. I mean, we have this cultural disconnect with the Gulf, very different religions. And yet there is so much warmth and strong strength of relationships between us and the Gulf countries today. So he did all that in the first term. Today, what we are witnessing is Mr. Modi is not traveling much. Today, Right now, it's Dr. Jaishankar who is traveling all across the world, relentlessly building bridges and furthering India's national interest. And India's foreign service, the IFS, nowadays it's become very confident. They have a very clear direction of what to do. Earlier, India's diplomats and ambassadors did not have a clear idea of what our national interest is, what the policy is, what does the government want to pursue as a big picture thing. Today is very clear. Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows what to do. So that's what we're doing. Our economic policies, what the government implemented in the past 7 or so years, they are now bearing fruit. We are seeing unicorns born every week. In the coming years, you will have a unicorn being born almost every day in India. The entire infrastructure is being upgraded. The airports, the nuclear situation is also good. We are, like you said, we are building new weapons, developing new weapons, modernizing the military. So there's this whole overhaul of the country that's happening. We are also looking into the energy reserves, strategic energy reserves. That's why we have good relations with the Gulf and so on. Because of this, India has now become a genuine world power. It's not one of the top 2 world powers, but it is one of the 3 or 4 global poles. So today, what we are seeing is a multipolar world. A multipolar world is when we don't have only one superpower, 2 superpowers, but 3 or 4 major powers. So the 2 main powers are the US and China. They would both like to see a bipolar world where they only matter, nobody else matters. But as long as India exists, and Russia exists, and possibly France exists, we're going to have a multipolar world. France. Most people don't realize this, but France is a major Indo-Pacific naval power. It has multiple assets, territorial assets in the Indian Ocean, all the way up to Antarctica. For example, the Réunion Island, which is close to the Seychelles, is a French territory, and they have multiple other territories near Antarctica in the southern Indian Ocean as well. And they have a fleet of nuclear submarines that is typically anywhere in the world as an effective second strike option in case somebody messes with them from the military perspective. So they are a major Indian Ocean power, and they have an independent foreign policy, independent of NATO and the US. And that's where US and France have lots of frictions, right? So today, the main powers are the US and China, obviously, and also India, Russia, and France as well. So we are in a multipolar world. And if you follow the events, India and France are cooperating. It's almost like a strategic alliance today between India and France.
Because we are the 2 cornered people.
Because we all seek strategic autonomy from the US. We do not want to fall under the US hegemony completely. So India is buying Rafales from France, the aircraft. We are buying the Scorpion submarines from France. We may have certain other things going on behind the scenes which we may not know about, right? So there's all kinds of things going on. Mr. Modi visits France regularly. Mr. Macron also comes to India from time to time. There is a good relationship brewing there. So that is where India stands today. India is now recognized as one of the major geopolitical powers in the world. If you see the past 4 or 5 months since January, there have been dozens of international visits to India. World leaders, senior diplomats, foreign ministers, finance ministers, and so on. It's a non-stop stream of visits. And Dr. Jaishankar is going all around the world. Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi, who is the other minister in the foreign ministry, is also going all around the world. And India's diplomats are very active. We are pushing back at the UN Security Council against any BS that's thrown our way. So India is now standing up for itself. And as long as the economy grows, we're going to be fine. Because if your economy grows larger, you have more money for the military as well, and so on.
Could you sort of highlight this World War III situation? That if it were to take place, how do you see it panning out? Is it going to be 2 sides against each other? Is there going to be 3 sides? Triple threat match? I don't know what's happening, because this whole India kind of coagulating with France makes sense to me due to my limited understanding of geopolitics, primarily got from conversations with you. But I'm looking at it as 3 different sides kind of against each other. But has a war ever happened that way? Like, has a 3-way war ever happened?
If you look at the history of Europe, there have been all kinds of wars. Small wars, big wars, multi-sided wars, and so on. If you look at the Napoleonic Wars, lots of sides came together against France at the time. So all kinds of scenarios have played out in the future, in the past, sorry. And that's why we study history, because that tells us what kind of things can happen again. Because human nature is cyclic, human nature is predictable, the patterns recur again and again and again. These are the cycles of history. That's why history is so fascinating. And that's why if you study history properly, you understand geopolitics, because you know what's happening right now. So if we talk about World War III, there are several potential scenarios. If the US pushes too hard against Russia in Ukraine, they may provoke Russia into doing. If they corner Russia too far, if they leave them with no recourse, then something may happen there. And when we're talking about World War III, we're always talking nuclear, obviously. I mean, the Russians are not crazy. Mr. Putin is not a crazy person. He's not a madman like he's portrayed. He's a very rational person. He has governed his nation very rationally the past 2 decades. But if you push him too far into the corner, if you poke the bear too hard, something may happen. And that's what they achieved by starting the war in Ukraine. It was not the Russians who actually started it. The Americans pushed them, and eventually the Russians had to fire the first shot. And the person who fires the first shot is the bad guy. It's always like that.
Wow. What is in it for Indian citizens in terms of, we spoke about the possibility of hot war. Folks living in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, at least the metros, Kolkata because it's near the northeast. Should we be worried if there's a hot war?
I believe we should not be worried. Peace can only be achieved through strength. You don't have peace through love and affection or mutual respect. Peace can only be achieved through strength. That is the lesson we have to remember from Vishnugupta Chanakya's life. Peace through strength. Today, India is building its strength, its conventional military strength. We are building submarines. We are building. We are modernizing the army, the infantry, and all that. The air force, and we have the nukes.
I just want to highlight something that Major General G.D. Bakshi told me, and that Saket Modi, who's one of the world's cybersecurity experts, told me. Even as Indian students, especially if you're an engineering grad, you can contribute to the Indian military in general a lot by choosing not to go abroad and actually applying for jobs with the Indian military to be a part of this change. And right now, India needs it more than ever. So if you want to do something for your country, and if you're at least a science grad, this is the time. You can actually apply and do a lot there. If you're a coder and you want to do something for your country, know that the Indian military, for sure, maybe not publicly, but for sure, is building a cyber unit as well, because so is China. And if a hot war happens, there's going to be a cyber angle in it. That's the true nature of World War III. So when you say peace is in strength, maybe as Indian citizens, rather than focusing on fear and focusing on our amygdalas, we should focus on our cerebrum, focus on thinking, logic, and adding to the strength.
Yes.
Go on, sir. Now I will let you go on.
Right. So India is modernizing its military. We don't know about our cyber capabilities. For the past 7 years, we don't know anything that's happening. I remember when Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, for the first couple of years, there were these hackathons, students showing off their hacking skills, coding skills, and then it became quiet. So maybe it was a talent acquisition search 100%. Or something. It's 100%. Possible. Yeah. And it's always the young coders who are the best, So I am quite sure we have reasonably good, or maybe more than reasonably good, cyber capabilities, which we will not speak about, obviously, in the public domain. We have space capabilities as well. We have ASAT weapons. We have good satellites. And we have, like we spoke about, the nukes. So we have the strength. We have the ability to counter China in any way. If they try something, we have the answers. The whole of Tibet is open and barren. We know exactly where their camps are, their military camps and everything is. It's easy to pinpoint it. We have extraordinarily accurate cruise missiles, the BrahMos missile and other missiles as well. So we can take them out if they start something. We can even interdict the Malacca Strait if we want. Using the BrahMos missile and various other strategies, we are even developing a new kind of weapon, which is a missile-delivered torpedo. A torpedo is like an underwater missile, but it will be first delivered by air, and then it goes underwater, and then it will go and do its final mission, that sort of thing. So it's a hybrid kind of weapon we are developing. And every other week, we have a new alert out in the Bay of Bengal for some kind of weapons test or something. So we are very busy. ISRO, DRDO, mostly DRDO is extremely busy in developing and testing out new weapons. So we are in a good position. There is no need for the citizens of India to panic or be afraid. We are a very powerful nation. We have all the answers to anything China can throw at us. The only thing is that I am sure I don't have to tell the government this. We have to be vigilant, eternally vigilant. Don't take the adversary for granted. Don't take them lightly. Take every threat extremely seriously, and we'll be fine. So what India needs right now? India needs at least a decade of peace. And we can only achieve peace through strength. If we have a decade of peace, we could conceivably reach the $10 trillion mark within 10 to 15 years. If we have peace, if India remains at peace. So that is the key, to achieve peace and to maintain peace for 10 to 15 years until we reach the $10 trillion economy mark. Once we reach there, we are a major power, almost like a superpower.
Speaking about history being cyclic, India has been dominated by invasive forces because of the divide and rule policy primarily. And even today, the nation internally is divided.
Yes.
There is a very strong left-wing versus right-wing narrative that's going on in the nation. Do you think that both the narratives, and I'm not highlighting one single one here, both the narratives and kind of all the negativity on either side is driven through external Chinese forces, through psychological warfare or cyber warfare, or our other rivals? Like, for example, could the left-wing narrative be driven by America for their interests or China for their interests? And could the right-wing narrative be driven by someone else, say Russia? Is this a possibility?
It is a very good question. So today we are living in a world where national borders are in some ways irrelevant because of the cyberspace. So what's happening in India? See, in any society, you need different opinions, different positions. There is a healthy society. If you have only one opinion, uniformity of opinion, that is not a healthy society. That's very strange. That's monochromatic and unhealthy and unnatural. So India is a vibrant democracy. We have all kinds of different political opinions and all, and it is categorized as left versus right. And nowadays the right is dominant because of the kind of government we have, which came because of the right wing, so to say, the right wing viewpoint or worldview of India. So we have this clash going on within India. And the question you have asked is very important, much of this could possibly be orchestrated from abroad, from outside of India. Because you see certain ideologies which are politically, they don't have much currency in India. Because we see the result of the elections and we see who's winning. And yet these certain political factions seem to be very powerful, and they seem to have unlimited access to funds and all that. So that is a very old trick in the playbook, in the geopolitical playbook. You fund certain political positions in the target country. You prop up certain politicians, or you create new leaders out of nowhere, like Mr. Zelinskyy, right? And then you use that to divide the country, fragment the country, and possibly bring your sort of person to power so that you can control the country without actually setting foot there. So it is certainly a possibility. I am not aware personally of who's funding what, or if anybody is funding anyone at all, but it is certainly a very significant possibility.
And it's certainly what the news traditionally will not tell you.
The news will never tell you that.
Because even the news is sort of on one of the two sides. And media generally, you see narratives being drawn by journalists.
Yes.
Who sometimes draw very anti-right wing or anti-left wing narrative. You need to be able to read between the lines. And most importantly, the bottom line here is that the entire nation needs to come together and stop kind of focusing on elements of fear, elements of what can go wrong, and understand that the larger source of fear is on the outside of the borders, where we do have a threat in the form of China. We sort of have an ambiguous threat in the form of USA as well. You said something earlier on in this podcast about how America possibly could have funded the terror attacks that India saw in the 80s and 90s. We know that the terror attacks were funded by Pakistan. Pakistan is not an economic superpower, or to be able to have the money to execute such large-scale attacks. They were getting the money from somewhere. At that stage in the 80s and 90s, most of the money.
US.
Yeah. But what was the US's intentions for orchestrating terror attacks in India?
So it's like this. I think it was in 1979 that the USSR's invasion of Afghanistan happened. Now that was an expansion of the sphere of influence of the enemy nation for the US. So what they did was they started this terrorist training program, Mujahideen training program in Pakistan. They provided all unlimited funds to Zia-ul Haq to start these Mujahideen factories, and they also provided unlimited weaponry. And the idea was to wage a proxy war against the USSR in Afghanistan. And that's something that went on for the best part of a decade. Eventually, the USSR was forced to withdraw. So the American strategy worked. Now, once the USSR withdrew, what happened is that Afghanistan came under the Pakistani influence completely. That's firstly. There was this Northern Alliance, there were these coalition governments, they were there for some time. But the Pakistanis had created this massive Mujahideen factory, including the Taliban. The Taliban was created during the time of Benazir Bhutto in the 90s. That was the beginning of the Taliban. So once the Afghanistan civil war ended, these Mujahideens, they were like out of work. There was only one work they knew, fighting. So then they were diverted into Kashmir. There is the price the Pakistanis extracted from the US. We did this for you, now you're going to do this for us. So, and even while the Afghanistan conflict was going on, there was this insurgency going on, terrorism going on in Kashmir, across the border. All of that money was being sent by the US. All the money, the training, the arms, ammunition, everything. And once the Afghanistan thing got settled, all of that was poured into Kashmir. There was, I think, 1989 or something, when suddenly there's this explosion of terrorism in Kashmir. So that is when the Kashmiri Hindus, the Kashmiri Pandits were forced out of Kashmir. So that was all, whether we like it or not, there is no other way to say it. It was all funded and financed by the US.
If you read the book Sapiens, you understand how religion can be used to manipulate people on either side. I'm not talking about one religion in particular, but any religion can be used against you. Your religion can be used against you. Because for you, it's a sense of faith, it's a sense of belonging and identity. But anything that you give that much emotional importance to also becomes your point of weakness. And someone can arm twist you and make you do things that you would have not normally done. That's just how the nature of power and the nature of history is. That especially when it comes to divide and rule policies, people will catch you by the balls and make you do what they want. Like make you their puppet. So in a way, what you're indirectly saying here, sir, is that everything we've seen in Kashmir over the last 20 years, 30 years, all these Indian military folks, the Indian military personnel who have been giving their life up for the situation in Kashmir, somewhere it's caused because of Big Daddy America.
Yes.
And Big Daddy America's geopolitical interests.
The Pakistanis used the Americans, and the Americans knew what was happening. They did not care about India. The thing is, initially the Americans had tried to woo India during the time of Mr. Nehru. They had offered India nuclear technology and much more. They had offered India a permanent seat in the UN Security Council.
To make us a bro in their Cold War.
To make us a bro in their Cold War. Obviously, they will have their own benefit in mind, but that's what they had offered India. Mr. Nehru said no, multiple times. Then the US turned to Pakistan, and they just turned their backs on India. And then they started seeing India as a geopolitical and long-term adversary, because India went into the lap of the USSR through Mr. Nehru. That's what happened.
Why did Nehru side with USSR?
It's strange, isn't it? Mr. Nehru was an Anglophile. He loved the British culture and all that. He was a lover of the English language and all. And yet he sided with the USSR, not the English-speaking world. It's because he was a Fabian socialist. That was his ideology. That's what he learned and absorbed during his years in England. There is this society in England called the Fabian Socialist Society. It is a certain form of socialism which believes in very slow, gradual change. No revolutions, no big reforms. Let change happen very slowly. That's called the Nehruvian rate of growth of the Indian economy, 2% per year. So Mr. Nehru sided with the USSR instead of the US. Then the US started seeing India as the adversary. They started funding and financing Pakistan. And they were okay to see India bleed. They had made many other countries bleed. So they were fine with that. And then the Pakistanis also, the only thing that keeps alive the legitimacy of the Pakistani army and ISI is this threat from India. The Pakistani army claims that India is an existential threat for Pakistan, even though India has never started a single war with Pakistan. But that's the only thing that keeps them in power. That's what gives them legitimacy in the eyes of the people. The moment that legitimacy goes away, the people will rise up against them. So they keep this threat of India alive, and that's how they're able to keep this going. So if you keep the Kashmir terrorism alive, then India will be upset, unhappy, and there will be this tension, constant tension, which keeps the role of the Pakistani army paramount in Pakistan, more than the Prime Minister and the government. So that's what they have always been doing. So now that Big Daddy US is gone, they have Big Daddy Xi Jinping for now. Maybe in the future they'll go back to the US. Who knows what will happen? So that's what they play. That's the game they play.
Hard-hitting question. Could there ever be a Big Daddy India for Pakistan?
when India has sufficient money, even I used to wonder, why doesn't India buy Pakistan out? You buy the generals out, they'll move. The reason why this has never happened is that there are certain people who can always go beyond our offer.
As in?
As in, let's say I offer the Pakistani generals $1 billion. China can double that anytime they want. If I offer 2 billion, they will offer 4 billion. They can. It's like the game in when you are bidding for something, and people are putting up their bids, and then you announce that whoever bids the highest, I'm going to double it. That's it. End of story. So then you buy the item, right? So that sort of thing. The Pakistani generals and dictators are for sale, but India doesn't have the deepest pockets. There is a bigger guy out there. There are two big guys out there, the US and China, who have deeper pockets than India. And that's why the Pakistanis always go towards those two quarters. The moment India becomes bigger than China, let's say hypothetically, that's when we can buy Pakistan out.
We haven't really spoken about Putin much on this particular podcast. And it is, at the end of the day, a Russia-Ukraine themed show, because that one geopolitical event has set off so much else in the world. Again, first COVID happening, then this happening. I don't know what's going to happen next. Is Putin going to be alive to see what's going to happen next? Because they say he's got blood cancer. They say that he's sending lookalikes, doppelgangers out, and he himself is actually bedridden. There's all these conspiracy theories about him out there right now. What's the truth in terms of... So how do you look at kind of Putin's angle in this whole war? And I ask you this because I remember the last podcast we did, you had mentioned a line saying that if Russia wants, they can actually take over Ukraine in one shot.
Yes.
But they aren't doing that. So I actually want to know everything about Putin. Because again, as we spoke about early on in the show, it's a few group of men at the top who decide the future of their country and therefore the future of the world in some cases. So let's talk about the man at the top.
So Vladimir Putin came to power about a couple of decades ago. He came to power when his country was in ruins. So after the collapse of the USSR, Boris Yeltsin was in power. And what he did was he put all of the money of the USSR in the hands of a few people, the so-called oligarchs. So the USSR was a collectivized society. Nobody held any private property, but everybody worked and produced resources and the economy. So in effect, the Communist Party was the custodian of the people's money. The wealth they had generated over generations of labor. So all of that wealth was in the custody of the USSR's Communist Party. After the USSR broke up, all of that wealth came into the hands and control of Mr. Boris Yeltsin. And what he did is he parceled out all of this wealth and all the big industries into the hands of a few oligarchs, of a few people who is his cronies. And then these guys proceeded to destroy those industries. So essentially, one could say that Mr. Yeltsin was an agent of the West. And his task was to liquidate the wealth of the USSR so that Russia would never be a threat again. So after he moved on politically, Mr. Putin was appointed to power. It was hoped, I believe, that he would be another puppet, but he turned out to be something very different. And he set about rebuilding the Russian economy. And the oligarchs are still there. Once something is in place, it stays in place, kind of. And they are too powerful to be displaced, so he worked with them. And he slowly rebuilt the economy. It was stabilized first. The Russians were standing in long queues for bread and soup. That's how it was. So Mr. Putin stabilized the economy. After a decade or so, he started rebuilding the military. And by 2014, he took over Crimea because there was something left over from history. And I'm sure this entire Ukraine thing was planned for a decade or so, because it was known what the US was doing, what NATO was doing. It was expanding eastwards relentlessly. So once you come to Ukraine, that's a red line the Russians won't allow. And that's why this entire thing has happened. Now, when it comes to Mr. Putin, he's very secretive. We don't know much about his personal life. He is known to have been married. I think he has 2 daughters. It seems that he was divorced and he has some gymnast girlfriend or whatever. That's not important. That's his personal life. It has nothing to do with us. But now these rumors that you speak about, that he may have blood cancer or some other form of abdominal cancer or something else. Well, there is no evidence for it. It's all coming out from the more or less Western media. We don't really know what's happening. I mean, I'm personally not aware of whether he's sick or he's well, or whether it's all strategic ambiguity like they say. We don't quite know. In case he is not well, then he would possibly conceivably have planned for his succession, that after me who comes in, because if he moves on, if he passes away and a weak leader comes to power, then his 20 years of work will be wasted. So there will be some kind of succession plan in place, which we don't know about. In the Chinese Communist Party, there's a very clear method of succession. You have to come to the top 5 in the party, the Politburo, the Central Committee, and from those guys, one guy is chosen. That's how it is. And it's usually 5 years, but now Mr. Xi Jinping has extended it beyond 5 years. Now, in the case of Mr. Putin, there is no such mechanism that we are aware of. So I'm not sure what the succession plan is. I think he's already crossed 70 years of age. So I'm sure he must have thought about it. But we don't quite know. And maybe it is by design that we don't know. Because you should never let the world know what you're planning.
And I don't feel you can trust mainstream media when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine situation, which is why I ask you, sir, as a geopolitical expert, what's happening on ground today? And what do you think Putin is making of it?
So I try to source my information from various small outlets like Twitter accounts and Telegram accounts and all, in addition to the mainstream picture, so that I get two sides of the perspective. Because in mainstream social media, you don't get the Russian perspective. You only get the Ukrainian and US perspective. So what appears to be happening right now is that the Russians are consolidating their hold on the territories they have captured. And they are inching forward and trying to denazify those regions. So the Azov regiment and all, they are being made to surrender or being wiped out. That's what's happening. They are creating this cauldrons, which is encircling the enemy and then wiping them out from inside, asking them to surrender. If they don't surrender, you know what happens. So that sort of thing. So they have not used the Air Force much. They have a massive Air Force. The Russians have hardly used their Air Force. And they have a massively powerful military. But they have been very restrained in their use of power. So it is clear by now that they had limited objectives. They did not want to take over the whole of Ukraine or even half of Ukraine. They only wanted to take over the parts of Ukraine which are Russian-speaking, Russian majority. So that seems to be something they are close to accomplishing. Obviously, the situation is still contested, and the Americans are pouring in weaponry and supplies into Ukraine so that the Ukrainians can keep on fighting. So it looks like this conflict will drag on. The Russians don't want to overwhelm the whole country. It's not something they want to they don't want to overextend their army. So it looks like this conflict will remain a low intensity conflict, like an insurgency for the foreseeable future, and the Americans will fight till the last Ukrainian is alive. That's what it looks like.
I'll give you an analogy from judo, because Putin is also a judoka.
Yes.
In judo, when you're having a match, okay, with someone, suppose I'm fighting with you, no matter whether you're big or you're small, usually a lot of judokas kind of hit the other guy's leg with their own leg. And you kind of throw these little jabs with your leg to just put the guy off balance and to intimidate. And then at the right moment, you throw the person.
Yes.
And you win a judo match by throwing them cleanly. It's like wrestling or holding them down for a while. So I'm perceiving this as his version of hitting the leg of America as much as he can, to just intimidate and kind of put them off guard, and a throw will come. And obviously my next question is, when will that big throw come, according to you? That when is shit gonna break through? Is it going to be when China invades Taiwan properly, or India?
It could be a number of scenarios. I think the Russia-Ukraine situation seems to be stabilizing. It is foolhardy to make predictions there, but it seems to be the way it is, and it may stay that way. If something happens, it could happen most likely in the Indo-Pacific, either India-China or China-Taiwan. These are the two most likely spots where trouble could erupt. If it is India-China, it will happen before 2024. So we could be we could be in for something in the coming months, possibly, if it is to happen. Otherwise, it is Taiwan, which could happen anytime this decade. The Chinese will make a move on Taiwan when they perceive that the time is right, or if they start panicking that we are no longer progressing the way we want to progress, and let's grab what we can before we become too weak. So these are the two main possibilities, the most likely possibilities if something happens. I hope no war ever happens. I would like peace. But yeah, it's either China-India or China-Taiwan. The Russia-Ukraine thing seems to be stabilizing. Will a throw come from Putin's side? We don't know. He is somebody that you can't really predict. So he may also have planned something, but I can't really tell as of today.
So everybody, including the leaders at the top, geopolitical experts, citizens, army generals, are just sitting back and waiting and seeing who flips out first, basically.
Everybody's watching each other warily.
Wow. This was a good podcast, sir. Speaking to you after, I think, 6 months now. Again, it's another Abhijit Chavda special on the Ranveer show. So many more geopolitical angles that we can speak about. But for this one, for this geopolitics update, sir, do you have any final kind of cues for the audience?
What I would say is that this decade, the 2020s, is going to be most likely the decade of vast geopolitical change. Typically, you see geopolitical change decade upon decade. If you go year upon year, you don't see much happening. But in this decade, you're going to see changes happen that typically take several decades to happen. And it's already in motion. So there could be a hot war this decade, maybe in the coming years. But the entire global chessboard is going to be realigned by 2030. That is for sure. Political borders, national boundaries may change by 2030. So we need to be prepared mentally for this, and we need to be resilient as a nation.
Abhijit Chavda, sir, thank you once again. Brilliant episode. And I hope you had fun.
Thank you so much. Great fun.
That was the episode for today. I missed Abhijit Chavda on the show as much as you did. He's going to be back for a lot more episodes very soon. Let me know what you thought of this particular episode. Also know we did 2 sequel episodes to this, but on our Hindi podcast, TRS Hindi. Those were India-Pakistan specific because I feel like those episodes need to reach the masses. This is an episode that should reach the world. Often in the West, in Europe and America, you get your news through traditional news media, which may not be true 100% of the time. Or you get your news possibly through Twitter sources. For me, that's why I believe in Abhijit Chavda. He's a scientist. He doesn't put forth his opinions. At the most, he puts forth his predictions based on facts, based on pattern recognition. That's how he predicts the near geopolitical future. Lots more episodes coming up with him. Do tell us in the comments what you enjoyed about this particular episode. Do recommend more guests in this domain. Geopolitics is returning to the Ranveer show. It's a very important decade for all of us. And I sincerely hope that the Ranveer show becomes a big part of where you get your international news from, because it's always going to be unfiltered. It's always going to be hard-hitting. And it's always going to leave you a little bit different than what you were when you began listening to the episode. Let's wait and see what happens over the last 10 years. And for now, let's look forward to another episode of The Ranveer Show with Abhijit Chavda.